shape that we use all of the time that we probably take for granted. It's something you use every day, and it's something we've used to design and create everything we've ever engineered. What do we see? When we go back to ancient times and look at the cultural customs that we continue, what are some of the things we maybe take for granted and forget perhaps they have a meaning? It's something that was not only on this building, but was used to create and design this building. From it we get sine and cosine triangle ratios, but we also get all of the waves. Sound is a wave, color is a wave, energy flows in a wave. Over and over again we see, and in physics we use the waves to express everything. We use it to make our speakers, and we've used it in ancient times, and perhaps even forming our plates and our bowls actually had a more significance than just holding liquid, because we could make it much more easily if we were to have made something rectangular or something more shaped like a box. Why do we see it on the heads of saints? And why do we see it forming the shape of the planets? So from the large to the small, we see it in all of the atoms and all of the molecules we learn about. We see it in symbolism. This is the word for Muhammad, and they often put a circle around it. We see bubbles. One of the reasons bubbles form rainbow colors is because when light reflects 42 degrees off of water, it'll make a rainbow. It'll diffract or kind of bend the light and create colors. Well, since a circle will eventually always have 42 degrees, you'll always have these rainbow colors wherever there's light and there's a bubble. We use them in our prayers, in our dances in ancient times. We forget it's in a lot of the things we eat. In our religions, this was the cross of Constantine we'll mention. From our zodiacs to our calendars in different cultures. This is the Sumerian carving. It's one of the most ancient civilizations we know of, and this is some of their origin story. And we see the same symbol. So it's something to consider when we look at a symbol. Symbols will have multiple meanings. And so let's talk a little bit about what that symbol of the circle means, kind of looking at it like an emoji. And what I love about looking at symbols is that they have so many different meanings to them. Like fire. Fire is not just hot. Fire can purify, it could light the way, it can help lead people, it can nourish you and warm you and cook for you. So even as you think about the circle, hopefully you could share with me some of the ideas you get with regards to the symbolism. And when we look at the symbolism of a shape, or in this case the circle, we also want to look at what are the properties of the circle. And that'll help us to understand about circles. I see them everywhere, every day, but as a math teacher you begin to see how we use circles to understand everything, even calculus. We use it to create things, from the geometry shapes to even more complicated things like cathedrals. The other thing is that it also has a significance historically. There's in ancient times, the circle represented the creator, some infinite being that you cannot understand. And I like it because it's a lot like the number pi. See, the number pi is something infinite which you could never truly count and get to. You can kind of understand the idea of it, but you can't truly understand it fully and completely. And that to me is kind of how I look at some symbol of a creator as well. So let's go through some of the properties, and you'll see a symbol is much better than a word because it has much more meaning to it. Like an emoji, one emoji will have multiple words. There's an old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So let's look at some of the qualities of a circle and help us to better understand maybe the symbolism. And we'll look at how it's used in science and math, and then if everything is made from a circle. We're all atoms, and everything is made of, your body's made of trillions of atoms. Same with a chair or a table. It's made out of circles. And so we may not even realize that. And we'll look at the historical, religious context of using it. Have you ever thought about why there's a circle over the heads of a saint? And then if we still keep you along for the journey, we'll look at how we could create different shapes using math, or even how the sound wave comes from our circle. So the circle is full of so much meaning and symbolism. You'll never hopefully look at a circle again. For me, it's a good reminder throughout the day. So one thing is that a circle is balanced on all sides. So this definition of a circle is that it's the same distance from the center all the way around. It's an infinite number of points around the center. So there's a center point, and there's something to center your life on, you could say, philosophically. The circle is great because it's durable as a structure. It has a little bit of give to it. Obviously, it's what we could put thousands of pounds on a wheel and roll it down the street. Another property of the circle, right, is that it's going to enclose things and it's going to surround them. It allows for twists and turns and wheels and bottles and curves. So, in real life, everything has curve. Imagine if everybody was non-curved, we would look like Minecraft. Everybody would have straight edges and lines and curves and pointy ends. So the circle, or the arc, which is a piece of a circle, gives us the twists and the turns and the ability to even program a computer to look like things are moving. And another property is momentum. So when you have that circle, you're allowed to continue and use the momentum. So for example, going down a hill, you could move thousands of pounds and it'll move itself. So it unlocks your potential and the force and some inertia. When you use a circle, you can actually place it on something and tell whether it's off center or not. So it helps you to find that center. Again, it could be philosophical, but in mathematics we use the circle to find our perpendicular bisector, to find the middle of things, thirds of things, any amount, but it can also be placed around a shape and you can see exactly where the middle is and then how to adjust. It allows you to bounce, and obviously we mentioned like a wheel. It gives resilience as a structure. It allows things to flow or glide the way your veins are really circular. If you cut one, it would have a round shape to it. So tubes, pipes, and things that flow where we usually have water, or in our case, in our body, blood, we will have things flowing. So it gives efficiency, and it allows things to run more smoothly. Like, why aren't the pipes that go down under your sink and the water goes down the drain, why aren't they square? Why are they round? So as we mentioned, everything is allowed to be carried, so it gives you the ability to be efficient, but also maximize your potential, your ability to handle things. And of course, one thing I hope we understand by the end here is that it creates. So the actual circle was a symbol of the creator, but it actually is used in math to create everything, including our understanding. Calculus was based on trying to understand how to get the area of a circle, because it's a shape that's, if you kind of unfold it, the circumference is infinite. The number pi is infinite. And so we figured out to chop it into many, many, many pieces. It starts to look like a rectangle. And ideally, you can find the area and do what we call limits and derivatives. So in math, we're going to see in this little presentation at least the basic shapes. We'll see triangles, rectangles, rhombus, trapezoid. We'll get them from making arcs or circles. And we use that same property to make the cathedrals and the cars and the things that we've designed. We just don't think about it because we use a computer. It's the basis of calculus, as I mentioned, and then it's also where we get waves. So when you graph the coordinates around a circle, it actually will graph into a wave. That's where we get waves. So sine actually means curvy thing. Cosine means complementary to sine. It's another curve that starts 90 degrees away. It's complementary. So that's where the word cosine comes from. And it's the basis of all atoms and chemical structures. So when you get into science, you're going to see biology, and you're going to see a lot of different shapes, geometry shapes, but as well as the circle. And you will see it as the basis of all atoms, as well as even things larger like the planets. So it's a pretty great symbol, in my view. You could look at it in math ways, you could look at it in practical ways, how we use it, but even Those of you who are philosophical or religious, it's a very powerful reminder of some great creator. And again, when we look at these things in art or in religion or in culture, there is a meaning behind it. So let's take a look at some of the meanings. Compass is the most important thing we've ever invented or discovered, or maybe someone like the Egyptians and many other cultures describe gods or angels coming and sharing the wisdom of how to make weapons and tools and gardens and other things. So we don't know exactly how it was first discovered, but not only was the wheel one of the most important inventions, what I didn't understand when I was younger and heard that was it was the circle. The circle was the most important thing we could ever understand because it led to the development and creation of everything we've ever designed and engineered using a compass. From the things we built, from cars to cathedrals and other things we've designed, all the way up to looking at the properties in chemistry and physics, which are just more advanced understandings, like calculus, understanding the circle. So let's take a moment to look at how we would make the circle. So we would use a compass in the old days, and a lot of people think of this, and this does have a circle on it. But the compass we would use, even for navigation, it would help you to chart the stars, help you to chart the navigation where your ship is going compared to the currents. We would use this kind of compass. It was basically a fixed edge, and the other side is a pencil, because the definition of a circle is you have a fixed point, which will be here, and as we spin or rotate the other arm, it'll make what's close to a perfect circle. So to give you an idea of what it looked like, the compass looked like this, and it took some time to get used to using it, and eventually, once you did get the hang of it, it became pretty easy. So now, rather than using this to make some of the shapes, I want to show you using a more advanced software how we would make a couple of basic shapes in geometry. So we start with a circle, and then if we were to make another one, and the middle of the second one was going to be on the edge of the first one, we're going to have this. And we have this egg shape. And you'll see that a lot in religions and in different cultures. In some of the first ancient drawings, probably 200 AD or 200 to 300, you have in Ethiopia of Jesus, they would put him in the egg shape. You also have the Buddha is often portrayed in this egg shape. I've often seen students with the Virgen de Guadalupe on their necklace, and they also will have the egg shape. And again, we make that by drawing two circles. So we'll get into it a little bit more later, but if we continue to add to this, and we just keep drawing a circle the same size around, and I make the new one at the center of where I left off, we're going to see this shape. And this shape, you'll see it, if we continue it, we would call it a flower of life, but this here is called the seed of life. And one of the reasons it's useful is you'll see we can draw all kinds of shapes in it. So let me get my pen tool to show you that these are the seeds of the basics of geometry and the geometric shapes. So we're being seeded or given the ability to grow different geometric shapes, like a trapezoid there. You can draw a diamond or a rhombus. You can draw a rectangle. I'll have to look if it's a golden rectangle. It might be. So you also have, of course, you can make a regular triangle, meaning the three sides are even if you connect these three spots, but I'm going pretty quick. We can draw that upside down. There's a symbolism of properties of a certain kind. They typically say male, female, but they're not about gender really, they're about qualities. And this would be the male, the upside down would be female, and together they would make the Star of David, which would be a balanced life, trying to balance both qualities, whatever your opposites are. So what we can see in here is the rhombus, the trapezoid, the rectangle, the regular triangle. We could do the Star of David with it. And of course, we can draw, because there's 6 sides, we can draw a hexagon here or on the outer edge. And then we could start to cut it in any combination of doubles. We could do 12 sides, we could do 24 sides, and so we're beginning to be able to create. We could now build a garden and a house, and certain shapes that require, like a rectangle requires a right angle, that if you don't build something perpendicular to the ground, gravity is going to make it start to lean over, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So we can now begin to do things that are basic constructions, make a garden, make a house, make a roof, and be able to replicate or to make these over and over again. So the circle itself was used, that compass, to create the most complicated designs and shapes, not just for art, but in the actual engineering of things we made. So let's look a little bit back further into some of the tribes. And like I mentioned in the introduction, why do these circles play such a prominent role? There is a reason and a purpose. And I'm not saying that I completely understand it, but I believe it was some sort of a homage or respect to the Creator that they had known or understood. And maybe some people do still understand it, but why did we stretch our ears and our necks and our throats, or wear the crown on our head, which is a circle, and do these things not just for the beauty of it or for the cultural significance? There's usually a symbolic significance behind that. And again, I believe it was dating way back to the traditional beliefs or understandings of the circle as a symbol. It was something to do with the Creator, and we use it to create the beautiful geometric patterns in a lot of these cultures that we see in the Native Americans and the Indians and the Indonesian and other cultures, pretty much every culture. In order to make the Aztec calendar or the zodiac, you need to be able to use a circle and make the geometric shapes. So in Africa, they would even scar circles on people, and they would do it as a form almost like tattooing, but it was specifically in a circle, little dots. And when you look at the art in Africa, you'll see a lot of circle patterns and designs. But again, even when we see other geometric patterns, we use this circle to make those. When we look at the Native Americans and the circle, we have both the drum, we have a lot of the designs here that they're wearing, but even the way that they're sitting and the way that they often dance is in a circle. So again, there was something special about that circle and something related to the great unknown and some creator. So they even have a very interesting tradition called the hoop dance. And if you look up, there's a TED Talk on hoop dance. Just Google hoop dance TED Talk. You'll see some very interesting philosophy behind it as well, and the principles that they have and beliefs that allow them to use the circle to help explain it. So even this symbolically would be Creator, surround and protect your creation. The star would be a creation. To protect and uplift is the feather. And so this is also symbolic. So we can also see that in other cultures as well. Dating back to Stonehenge being in a circle, and you have other cultural things. A newer site they've just discovered was Göbekli Tepe. First they thought it was 3,000 years old, and now they've discovered it's well over 10,000, and it's older than anything they understood that we could build. Some of the stones are 10, 20, 30 tons. They're carved out beautifully and perfectly, and this was intentionally buried. They don't know why someone buried it 10,000 years ago, but we believe people were cave people by this point, and no, they were already using very advanced tools and creating a round place of worship, they believe. We see the circle in, again, some African art, as well as in the Hopi or the Navajos. They have the wedding basket, and you'll see the star, which has 6 sides, which is kind of like the one we just made using the 6 circles. And when you are unifying, right, the female and male, the triangle upside down and the regular triangle are forming a union. We see it in this is the Scythian plate, but when you look at a lot of ancient archaeology, you'll see gold and silver and artwork that are circular. You see carvings in the ground or crop drawings both in South America and in Africa. Here you have Australia, you have these ancient carvings, and they often use the circle. In India, they use the mandala. The mandala is the word for circle and search for God. Incidentally, we'll take a look at Carl Jung. He believed that these were symbols that everyone understood, that there was something in our collective unconscious. And so, Japan actually puts the circle on their flag, and most of the things they design, their beautiful artwork and feng shui and the way that everything's so geometrically designed, it really has to do with the circle as well. We use it to build the Chinese zodiac and other ancient astrology tools. Of course, you would need it to build a chariot or to begin to have travel and to be able to move and lift things, to be able to drink things. This is from Sumeria in probably what they consider the most ancient culture we know of. And this was something to do with their creation story. We don't exactly know. There's this wheel. We often speak of the circle of life. This is Ouroboros in ancient Egypt, Greek, and it's a Norse symbol. And we're going to see that there was a chemist who dreamt of this, giving him the actual discovery of a very important chemical compound. Here's some Greek shield patterns. And so again, for some there could be a symbolism behind it, for others perhaps not. We have the calendars in South America, which are also circular and represent life and the creation of life and the gods around. We have this symbol called the flower of life. So if you continue drawing circles like I did and do another layer or two around it, and you draw a circle where the other two meet, you could actually create this pattern. And we see this in many places across the world. You even see this is an atom. Kind of is going to have a very similar shape. You're going to see Leonardo da Vinci, let me find that one, he actually had that shape in his notebooks. So when we look at this shape that Leonardo da Vinci was drawing, it's based on the one we just drew using the math software. And so looking at that, it kind of strikes me that it looks a lot like the hexagon shape of an atom. This is an electron microscope's view of an atom. So we see this, if you Google flower of life across the world, you'll see all the different places. And in this one's China, we have it in Egypt and Turkey, Armenia. The Knights Templar used it. So we see this, some of the Knights Templar would have that flower symbol we drew in our math software on their caskets. So here's, I wish we could see this better. The top one's Egypt. This is in Herod's palace. This is in Scotland, in Bulgaria, in China. It's a 3D version of it. And then they have it on Buddha's hand in India. So we see this shape not only in Da Vinci's sketches, but carved into places, ancient places, all across the world. Because without this shape, we couldn't do the geometry and design the things that we have designed. We also see the tea ceremony not only uses circles in the actual ceremony, but the actual movements are always in a circular motion, giving some tribute to the circular thing, the circular way of things. We have the seal of Congress, the seal of the president. We also put circles around them. So we have to often wonder, is there a reason behind it? And I believe there is. So, a couple fun ones, crop circles. We have our chakras, always represented by geometric shapes and a circle around it. But crop circles, if they're, I believe a lot of humans make them and they admit to making some, but if there are any that are real, when we look at sound resonance experiments, you could see how sound waves can move sand, so it could be frequencies from the earth, just energy causing geometric patterns. So again, if you look up sound resonance, you'll see some pretty amazing things that use sound waves to move sand around as well as move water around. You can see that just random frequencies will make geometric shapes. So that would give me the prediction that if there are any real crop circles, that could be what's happening. So let's look at really quickly some things we use. Carbonation, right? We forget that bubbles in our soap and in our carbonation are doing something very useful for us. The balls that we play with, football, basketball, soccer ball, whether you're playing pool or other things. And children do love playing with different round objects. When water goes down the drain, water molecules are circles. We forget everything we screw on that has a top. We often forget it needs to be that shape to work. Most musical instruments will have circles in them in order to work and to project the sound and to give different notes. We use the same circle for telescopes, for CDs, DVDs, for old people, laser discs. And in the old days we used glasses, but we used the properties of a circle in order to make our glasses. When we drew our first two circles, you would actually make an eyeball. Ooh, that's a terrible example. Let's go over here. So if I really quickly draw here one and then another one, whoops. And then in the center I could put another circle, we have an eyeball. And so the geometry of your eyeglasses come from understanding the circle. This is a jet engine also has to be that shape for a reason. Bowls and cups and drums and other important musical instruments and things that we use every day. This is a drilling machine, and also the Hadron Collider is a big old round circle. So we forget that we use circular things and drills and wheels and rims and tires all the time. Even the color wheel gives a blend of the different colors, and it could be an infinite thing. And of course your eyeball, and they say that's the window to the soul. And of course our veins and our arteries and things are tubular. Tubes are round and they're three-dimensional. They're in 3D. So we look at some religions. When we start in Egypt, you might wonder, why are these circles on the heads of some of the gods? And it was usually the ones who were priestly or loving or people who really fought to protect and care for others, what they would call agape, or caring for people who are not your friends or family. And we continue to see it. And the yin-yang symbol, the symbol for balance and opposites, and how everything has a little bit of blend of both. This is a Slavic pagan symbol. It's called a rod, and it's also based on the 6 sides. And in a lot of pagan traditions, you'll have that wheel, and you'll also see it in Buddhism, I believe. In Proverbs 8 in the the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, or in the Old Testament of the Christian and Catholic Bible, it says, I've been established from everlasting, as wisdom is talking, when there were no depths. And then it says in verse 27, when he prepared the heavens, I was there, when he drew the circle on the face of the deep. So even in the Bible we see some symbolism. In a moment we'll mention the word sin as well. This is the symbol for Allah in Arabic. They almost always put a circle around it. Incidentally, we have what looks like an alpha and omega sign. Here is the symbols of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path. Very similar. I noticed even the Slavics, they have a goddess that sounds a lot like Shiva. Here we have Jainism. They often put the circle, and then they have what the swastika became was something terrible, but it used to be basically a yin-yang symbol of balance, and we see it all over the world. So why did the Buddha have that circle? Perhaps they were more connected to the infinite or the divine. So in the Bible, when you see the word sin and translate it, take it to original Hebrew and get the translation, it's saying missing the mark, to be off target or off track. And so that's also using an image of a circle, because you think of finding the center. When you're trying to find your spiritual path, you're trying to find your center point, and you need guidance or some fixed center point to be able to turn to when you're lost. This here is what we call Constantine's cross. In I believe the 300s, Constantine and his men looked up in the sky and saw this symbol. And in this symbol you could spell the word Christ or Christos using the X, and the P stands for an R. And then the Y, C, T, O, C, Christos. The X is what the first letter is. So that would be in Greek. And then you have the symbol for alpha and omega. And of course we always see the saints and Jesus with the circle, even with the four-sided geometry, the 2 perpendicular lines and symbols in that. So why? again, it may be something to do with being connected with the divine, with the infinite, or being enlightened and having their eyes opened towards that. You'll see it in the saints, and even in a prayer wheel. So this is I guess it would be a Hindu prayer wheel, and they'll either carry it and spin it around, or they'll actually, the bigger ones, they'll push it, and inside are prayers and documents, manuscripts, and rather than reciting every word, they turn the wheel and they either meditate or say a prayer. Oftentimes you'll have the circle around the Om symbol in Hinduism. The word God in Greek is spelt with the circle. It's actually pronounced theos. That's the word th, or the first letter is the th sound. And of course we use rings. We say what the Creator puts together, let no man separate, and we put the rings on each other. So it's meant to be connecting to the Creator. And there's a symbolism behind that as well. Incidentally, when you put two menorahs together, you get a circle with that same star that we drew at the beginning. They say that the flames are supposed to complete the circle when you light it. And then we talked about the Dharma Wheel. We've seen this multiple times. And we even, when we pray, we give a prayer, we usually get in a circle, have a prayer circle. When we give a hug, we forget sometimes we're embracing someone in a circle. So getting back quickly to the mandalas, Carl Jung is the psychologist who created psychoanalysis, and he was a student of Sigmund Freud. They kind of separated in their beliefs, but he said that he believed mandalas and certain symbols were in our subconscious, and it was in our collective unconscious, meaning everyone around kind of had those inside of us and an understanding of them. And he got into this thing where he kept drawing mandalas, and he found they were very good both for him and his expression of his spiritual soul, but also for his patients, especially those with mental disabilities. There's something very balancing about looking at circles. I've noticed that even with myself and different students. Someone lent me a book, a student lent me a book randomly, and it was about near-death experiences, and I had almost died a few times. My appendix burst when I was younger. I had drowned, and so I didn't have a near-death experience, but they describe it as having a circle to it. So they say when they see that light, they give a description of it, and someone tried to use a computer to give what someone described it as like. So when they say that tunnel, they're really kind of looking towards a circle, they say. So I never thought of that as the light at the end of the tunnel being a circle as well. So, you'll see in different cultures, God's a circle, the center is everywhere, circumference is nowhere. I guess that's a Greek philosopher may have said that. But just the idea of the circumference being infinity. So what we learn about infinity is when you take a circle and you divide it by the distance across, like the letter th for theos, you'll get the number pi. And it's a number that goes on infinitely. So even though you could draw it, the math behind it is a number that is irrational and goes on forever. So, another one really quickly I mentioned at the beginning, where fruits tend to have circular pattern, and then the seeds will have a geometry pattern, and the seeds will often grow in that pattern of 5 or 4 or 3 or even many more like this. So we kind of take for granted we see these fruits all the time, and they both have circles and geometry inside of them, which to me look like stars. I'll just pick a number of sides and make a star out of it. So really we're looking at the biggest of the big, the planets and the things we know, swirling around in a spiral, but they're all circles. Not perfect circles, of course, but from far away they look like it. And, we get our energy from the sun, which is a big ball of gas, and it is a circle. And then we get to the small. We also have the smallest of the small. And the smallest of the small are atoms and molecules. And when we look at the molecules that we're learning in chemistry class, we may forget that these are geometric patterns that create compounds, but they're all made out of atoms. You and me and chairs are all made out of atoms. So this is the person who had the dream of that snake eating its own tail. The snake is typically a symbol of wisdom. And because of that, he had this idea of the structure of benzene. So the way that benzene was invented was dreaming of that circle snake. Ouroboros dream, they call it, because that's the name of that snake. So again, we have the molecules. This is fats, which is the three components for life, or fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. You'll see that the fats are made out of little lipid molecules. Even our very DNA is not just spiraling, but it's made out of a bunch of different molecules. So it's really made out of circles, and even has lipids that are circular connected to it. Of course, we've learned the coronavirus is circular with little antennas sticking out. And this is helium under a microscope. And this is kind of like an atom, trying to get an idea of what an atom looks like. And this is just talking about Gauss's law, which has to do with, they're going to be looking at an orbit of a shell, and showing how, again, that the circle or outer part of a shell can contain an electrical charge. So, second component besides the lipids are proteins and amino acids, and again, we're looking at circles. So even from the atomic and the subatomic, and we get into particle physics, you're looking at little teeny tiny particles. So when we look at the number pi, like I said, it's a number that's infinite. It's the outside circle round part divided by the diameter or side across. And we kind of don't always learn this in school, depending on how far you get in math, but the other shapes, the ellipse, the parabola, and the hyperbola, are just kind of cutting off pieces of a circle of a cone. We of course mentioned that all waves, sine and cosine waves, and sound waves, and color waves, and energy waves, we allow us to understand the language of it by using the circle. The wave comes from graphing the coordinates around a circle. So we can take this shape that we had been looking at before, and like I had shown you, the basics, we can begin to design many different types of shapes or geometric patterns. Calculus is actually based on trying to understand the area of a circle. The idea that the curved part is infinite, so you'd have to keep chopping it into infinitely smaller pieces. But calculus is actually based on what is the area of a circle. So like I said, if we use just this shape, the seed of life, we not only have something that people like to use for spiritual reasons and other symbolic meanings, but you have the seed to actually replicating things. So using that compass that we talked about or looked at the beginning, we can draw all these circles. And with those circles, we began to create things and build things. Weapons, chariots, gardens, buildings. We went into building things like the Colosseum and other ancient architecture. You would use circles to make these different geometric shapes like the triangle. We used the compass to make all of this, all of the cathedrals in the world. A lot of masons would use the compass to be able to design, including the more modern designs. So everything from the most basic thing like a chariot to the cars we use today, even up into the computers, are really using the same properties and principles that we've had to learn. Really beginning with trying to understand the circle. Because once someone could finally draw that circle, not only can you draw a wheel, you can begin to make these geometric shapes. And these geometric shapes can allow you to build almost anything you want to build. And so it's like a child who has the beginning, like the building blocks of something. And from there, you can put those together and make even more and more complicated or complex shapes. So the more circles we draw, the different angles we have, and there's ways that we use circles to draw pentagons and hexagons. And if I make a video on stars and flowers, you'll see all these patterns and designs. They really are, they're happening a lot. And we use a circle to create those as well. And when you sort of look at the way that something grows, even a flower, it starts with a circle in the middle. And then around it, oftentimes, you'll have the seeds in a geometric pattern or in a spiral. And then around there, you'll have the leaves spiraling so that each of them gets a little bit of sunshine. But even the stem, again, if we cut the stem and look at it, it's a circle. So it's interesting to me, going back to the math of that wave, not only do we use the circle to understand all sound waves and energy waves and everything like that. The circle makes waves, but the circle, when I look at it in nature, the circle is kind of what starts first before we start creating the beautiful patterns and designs. So similar to in math, we use these circles to create the beautiful patterns and designs. So I know it's a whole long video and it's a lot to say, right? But you could begin to understand maybe why I'm really fascinated and see circles everywhere I go. Because in teaching geometry for so many years, and then beginning to connect the ancient cultures together and see what they were talking about and how they use the circle as something related to an infinite creator, which in math it's used to create these shapes. And they're talking about something balanced and something that when you're off center, it helps you find your center, and something that gives you perspective and gives you strength and gives you efficiency. So we can take it to have other spiritual meanings, but we could also take it to actual mathematical and physical properties as well. They used to say, such as above, so below. Many things in the physical world will have a similar relationship to things that are spiritual. So not only is the circle used to create in math, but again, when you think about it, everything we're made out of is a circle, an atom. So again, maybe in both ways, spiritually and physically, when they say we're made in the image of the Creator, maybe we're meant spiritually, we're made in that image, as well as we're made literally in that image, in the symbol or image of a circle. We're all made out of that. So if the circle isn't important to you and you're made all out of it, I don't know what else I could do to convince you. But the circle is a very neat shape, and like it says down here below, it's great. So I see the circle everywhere, and if only like once or twice a day I could think, wow, the circle symbol is something I could use to create stuff, and it's also something that used to mean the Creator, and maybe I need to remember that. And maybe these things we wear, like our necklaces and our earrings and our different things that have circular designs, maybe they had a meaning behind them. And maybe this isn't it. Maybe this isn't all of it, and there's even more to it. They're like ancient emojis.